Hello and welcome to our program, Where God Weeps, a program where we speak about the situation of the suffering church around the world. In the village of Alokolum in northern Uganda, 213 young men are training for the priesthood at the Major Seminary. The seminary is bursting at the seams. Behind this joy, however, lies a deeper and more painful story that still lingers in the seminary today. During the civil strife in Uganda, which lasted from 1988 until 2007, rebels of the notorious Lord's Resistance Army overran the Diocese of Gulu and abducted 41 of its minor seminarians. The young men were taken off into the bush and forced to train as soldiers. 12 remain missing still to this day. To tell us more about this and the situation of the Church in Uganda, it is my pleasure to welcome Father Cosmas Alule, rector of the National Seminary in Alokolum, Uganda. Father Cosmas, thank you for being here today with us on our program.
It is a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you very much, and I welcome you all, my viewers.
Father, 45% of Uganda's 33 million are Catholics. How do you explain this extraordinary growth of the Catholic Church in Uganda?
The faith of the Catholics in Uganda is a young but vibrant faith, which is very well rooted in the history of the evangelization, which was marked right from the beginning with the story of the Uganda martyrs.
So the soil, I've heard and read about the Ugandan martyrs, so the soil already has the blood of the martyrs, the seed of faith in it.
That is true. And not only these 22 Uganda martyrs who were executed in Kampala, in southern Uganda, at the beginning of the evangelization, but also we have two other martyrs in the north, in the Archdiocese of Gulu, Gildo Irua and Daudi Okello, who have already been declared blessed. There were two young catechists who died for their faith doing the work of evangelization in the Archdiocese of Gulu.
I want to come back to the 22 because perhaps many of the people who are with us today in our program don't know the story, and perhaps you could just tell us very briefly the story of those 22 martyrs. What happened?
Well, the issue behind their execution was decided by the then king of the area, the Kabaka of the Baganda, who did not want to tolerate any of his subjects who was turning to another religion and giving his allegiance to another god and another power. And because in that time, the Kabaka as king was both head of the religion and head of the political administration. So he did not want to tolerate that, and that is why he persecuted these Christians who were showing allegiance to a different god and a different power. But also there were moral issues, of course, in the ethical code of the religion. That is the time many of the Christians started to resist his advances of homosexuality, which the Kabaka had learned from the Muslims.
I see.
Yes.
And the Christians resisted this moral imposition, if you will.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes.
Now the flowering of faith has come from this.
Yes.
And we see the great growth of the. How would you describe the faith of the Ugandans? Is it a naive faith? Is it a rooted faith? We know that, of course, there's martyrs and there are roots, but how would you describe the faith of the people today?
I think the church in Uganda has already bypassed that rudimentary period of evangelization, And the faith of the Catholics and Christians in general in Uganda is already well rooted and firm in the triune God, according to the teachings of the Church. And because of that, you can see that the involvement of the Christians in the life of the Church is very deep. Many lay people are well involved in the life of the parish or in the life of the Church, because right from the beginning also, actually the laity had been well involved in the life, in the growth of the Church.
The catechetical
yes,
work
and
of
that
the
is
Church.
Especially the ministry of the catechist.
Now, if you were to put a finger on a weakness
Yes.
within the Catholic faith in Uganda, what would that be?
Yes, the challenge of secularization that has not spared the Church in Uganda. You know, today in the global world, where there is a lot of influence from the modern world through the modern means of communication, a lot of secular influence is also flowing down into Uganda and into other African countries. And this, for me, is one of the challenges which is affecting the Church in Uganda.
So to help the young people
Yes.
to recognize the dangers of secularization and to keep them somehow rooted in their faith.
Yes, that is the work of the evangelization, actually the preoccupation of what we in the Church in Uganda should be preoccupied with, to make sure that our people remain rooted in their Catholic faith, in their Christian faith, and they see the dangers of the secular world, and that they are not taken away by the temptations of the world, of the secular world.
Yes.
Yes.
Father, another weakness, if you say, although perhaps it's simply a question of time, is although the Catholic population has been growing very quickly, the number of vocations have not been keeping pace, and that there is a shortage of priests in Uganda. Can you give us perhaps a brief insight as to why there are so few priests in Uganda?
I think partly, yes, statistically one can observe that the number of Catholics has been growing. Maybe there have not been as many ordinations to the priesthood as the population has grown. But I think that in my experience of working with the seminaries, there are enough vocations. I think what we needed was to have more houses of formation, which we don't have. When Uganda had a population of about 15, 16, 17 million, we had 4 national major seminaries, 2 for philosophy and 2 for theology, for the training of the Catholic priests in Uganda. Now, when the population is 33 million, we still have 4 major seminaries. We painfully have to turn away many applicants, major seminarians who have applied for formation in the major seminary, because we don't have any space.
I was going to come to this point because you yourself at the National Seminary, for which you are responsible, you have 213 young men and you are bursting at the seams.
Yes.
I suppose the pain for you is to be having to say no to vocations.
Exactly. That is the pain. Right now I have only 180 rooms for the major seminarians at Alokolum. But in this academic year, we had 213 seminarians. Last academic year, we had even more, 216. So that means we have had to accommodate more, to admit more candidates because of our love for the priesthood, but many have to share rooms. The library has become very small, congested.
Yes.
The chapel has become very congested. The dining hall has become very congested, and especially the lecture halls. So it is very painful that we have had to eliminate a number of applicants. Like this year, when we made our new intake of the new students who were to come at the beginning of September in the new academic year, we had to eliminate about 40 applicants. Alokolum, we admitted 83 new students, and I can tell you that we have graduated only 69, and now we are replacing that number with 83.
Okay.
And the sister seminary in Katigondo, which is also for philosophy, had to admit 96 new seminarians when they also graduated only 70 students.
Father, I think the challenge is clear. The answer is not.
Yeah.
The challenge is clear, the answer is not. The question I have is also for your particular seminary has a very particular history as well. And I would like to now turn the page and talk a little bit about this history, because your seminary was, particularly northern Uganda, was engulfed in a 20-year civil war between the Lord's Resistance Army and the Ugandan government, in which over 30,000 people were abducted and killed. And the question is that your seminary was at the heart. In fact, I believe you even had a refugee camp on the grounds of your seminary.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about this very difficult chapter in the life of your seminary?
Yes, it is true that the 20 years of war, of civil war in northern Uganda, with the epicenter in Gulu, affected Alokolum National Major Seminary directly, because Alokolum is just about 6-7 kilometers outside the town of Gulu. And 2 times when the security situation became too dangerous for the seminarians and the lecturers, 2 times we have had to evacuate the seminarians and take them to southern Uganda, to our sister seminary Katigondo, which is also for philosophy, where it was very safe. And that first time was from 1987 to 1992. Those 5 years,
wow.
the seminary of Alokolum had to live in exile, so to say. And the second one was in 2003 to 2005. And when the seminarians and the lecturers were removed away to safety, then the local people came and occupied the seminary
to protect it
as their for their security. It became an internally displaced people's camp, and that's how the camp in Alokolum developed. So when the seminary came back, the seminarians were brought back in 1992, and again in 2005. They stayed together. We stayed together with the internally displaced peoples, who during their stay in the seminary, of course, occupied all the structures, all the rooms of the seminary, and used them very badly. And that is how the seminary got a lot of damage, physical damage to the physical structures of the seminary.
That you subsequently had to repair.
Do a lot of renovation.
Yes.
And the worst one was when, by mistake, these refugees caused the fire and the library block burned down completely.
All the theological study books, everything gone.
Yes.
Father, I know also that there were 41 young men who were abducted, and in fact I believe still 12 are unaccounted for today.
Yes.
What psychological impact did that have on the seminarians, and what scars do you still see on the hearts of the young men today as a consequence of this civil war?
Yes, it is true that seminarians, young boys in the minor seminary, which is just 1 kilometer away from Alokolum, were abducted, and up to now 12 of them are not accounted for. And many of these students who were abducted, who came back, continued with their seminary formation, and we have them now as major seminarians with us. Some have gone already ahead, and they're already in the study of theology. It is clear that their abduction has brought them into a lot of trauma. And because of this, many of these seminarians from Gulu, especially from Gulu and Lira dioceses, who lived in the epicenter of the war, who had been abducted, when they come to us in the Major Seminary, they show a lot of signs of being themselves very violent. They are unable to be patient with the others. They would like to solve their problems
with
violence, by force. Now, because of this, the Uganda Episcopal Conference directed actually that all the major seminaries should have a trained counselor on the formation staff
to help these
young men.
Without going into too much detail, what would be the stories of these young men coming back? What would they have been obliged to do which traumatized them so deeply?
Many of them were forced to join the ranks of the rebels, and they were forced to carry heavy loads over very long distances. They were forced many times to kill people, and that is a way of brainwashing those who joined the rebel ranks.
Yes.
And they were able to see how women were being abused in the LRA camps, and these are the traumas which are going through their minds.
I know from other reading that, for example, Joseph Kony, who is known to be a madman and to have imposed terrible things on his soldiers, one of the things was to, as you say, to brainwash. He'd oblige them often to kill a relative or somebody, so that that person would completely belong to the LRA psychology, if you will.
That is true. And so those are the things which traumatized these students who unfortunately had been abducted for various periods with the LRA. Many of them escaped either during the time when the government soldiers attacked the camp of the rebels, or as individuals when they got the chance. Maybe they were sent to fetch water or to get firewood, or the soldiers who were assigned to guide them were not so vigilant.
Yes. And they could run.
And then they got that opportunity to escape. Yes.
I even know that some of these, or I've read that some of these young men were born in as abductees in these places. How do you try and counsel these young men who come back to you? How do you personally, are you dialoguing with them, and if so, how do you try and draw them out and heal their hearts?
Yeah, as I've said, many of these young men are traumatized, and because of this, we have trained counselors among the staff of the seminary, and the course of counseling as a study course is also on our study program. Now, these young men who have come from this background of the war, we keep an eye on them. Their own personal spiritual directors do a lot of healing counseling with them. And if there is need, the trained counselor of the seminary also has his own interventions. But the most important is also to live with these young people in the most normal way. The idea of always treating them as special should not be overstepped, should not be exaggerated. These people, they need to feel as normal people like all the other students who come from peaceful backgrounds.
Absolutely.
Yes, that is the best way of healing for them.
What would you say would be the scars on the culture? Now, we've spoken a little bit about the question of the scars on the hearts of the people. What would be the scars on the culture of this period?
20 years of war is a long period, and most of these, many of the people, the local people, spend in the internally displaced people's camps. And in 20 years you see a young person is already an adult. People become adults at the age of 18. But then even those who went to the camps already as children at the age of 3 or 4 or 5 were very much influenced by the atmosphere, by the life of the internally displaced people's camps. In the internally displaced people's camps, the soldiers who were government soldiers who were guiding the camps did not allow, for security reasons, for anyone to go out of the camp, maybe to dig in his or her field, to keep the animals,
So
and
no
to
work.
do no work. And helping organizations brought rations of food and distributed to the people.
So they became dependent.
So they became very dependent, and they lost the culture of work. And you can see in a small hut, the father, the mother, the children, and the grandfather, the grandmother, all who belong to the family lived together without any privacy. And the children saw what the parents did. And so this idea of respect, of patience, the culture of tolerance, all were affected, if not totally lost. And so now these are the things which the war has brought. The culture of work has been lost, the culture of respect, of tolerance, of patience, of consideration, of privacy. So the people now have to learn this once again. And it is very difficult.
And the problem is, of course,
Yes.
that Joseph Kony and the LRA are still active. They are in Sudan, in South Sudan, and in around the border regions. Are they still in parts of Uganda? Is there still a threat from the LRA in your region, for example?
In northern Uganda, I can say that now the direct threat of the LRA fighting and war is not there. Northern Uganda is totally peaceful. People have only to heal their trauma and resettle themselves, rebuild their lives. But it is very unfortunate Joseph Kony is still active, but though far away from Uganda. He is in the Central African Republic and in the regions of Darfur of Sudan. And from what we gather, from what we hear, he is still continuing with the atrocities which he did in northern Uganda. And that is the unfortunate part of it. So the people of northern Uganda are happy that the LRA do not have any foot in the region, in northern Uganda, but we are very sympathetic. We are very sad that they are giving more trouble, the same troubles
To other
countries. Yes.
Father, we've spoken a bit about the vocations, about the situation of the seminary, of the seminarians, and the life and the history. Now, a question for you is, after all of this, what are your needs? What are the challenges that you face with the seminary, with the students, that you would like to share with us?
The first challenge is, according to me, because of the growing number of seminarians, leading to congestion and, let me say, overpopulation in the seminary of the candidates, and the limited number of the formators. This year we were 15 resident formation staff and plus 2 others who were visiting lecturers. The ratio of student formator is still high, and this affects the quality of formation, because I believe that the quality of formation is achieved best when we have a one-to-one relationship with the student, when the formator and the student have a one-to-one relationship. But with so many students, the formators are overburdened. And so that is the first challenge. It affects the quality of formation to the priesthood. And secondly, of course, the second challenge are related to financial and material needs. We still have a lot to do to rehabilitate the seminary after the over 20 years of the
neglect and destruction
which has come through the war.
Yes.
We still have that to do. And as I said, when we are relating with the people around and the seminary cannot develop by itself alone, we also need material support for programs like in agriculture, which we can show to the population around how to live, how to regain back their culture of work. We have land on which we would like to do cultivation, grow some of our food ourselves, but we don't have a tractor, which also we can share with the population around. We could share to plow their fields at a small fee, but those are the difficulties we have.
In front of all of these challenges, and also in view of this difficult history through which you personally have gone and the seminary, what spiritual sustenance, what spiritual passage or what sustenance do you draw from in order to give yourself the courage to go on and the hope to go on?
I think the courage I get is the belief that if it had been purely because of our human efforts, our human intelligence, things will have come already to nothing. If things are still going ahead, the seminary is still going ahead, we still get more seminarians who want to become priests, it is a sign that there is a divine power behind all this. This is the Church of God, and God is the one carrying us forward. And this is evidenced by the fact that despite all these problems, the church is still living and people are still happy to profess their faith, and many young people are still happy to offer themselves for training to become priests.
Father Cosmas Alule, thank you for having been with us today in our program.
Thank you very much.
It was a great pleasure. Thank you.
It was my pleasure too.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for having been with us today in our program, Where God Weeps. And if you feel called to help Father Cosmas in his work, to pray or some further concrete action, I would encourage you to look at the contact information at the end of this program. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.